Hi folks, welcome to the channel. If you're a new or returning subscriber, please remember to like our videos, provide comments to help us with continuous improvement to our content, share with friends and family, and most importantly, subscribe. Thank you. Alright folks, so today I've got a formal student. So this is Robin. Robin, say hi to our subscribers and viewers.
Hello, hello.
Okay, so this is all about talking about your learning journey, your motivations into studying product design, and any advice that you can give to any young persons who are wishing to take this route. So to start off, what got you into product design, and what were the things that influenced you to study product design, potentially becoming a future career, if you can put it in that context?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually started from the artistic side. So I did quite a lot of fine art. When I did my A-levels and my GCSEs, I did art over design, and that was purely because of what was available for school. So I've always kind of journeyed up to London and went to art galleries. But then that kind of dissolved into going to design exhibitions as well. So New Designers was quite a big one. I went like every year with my dad. And that kind of gave me, well, the fact that it sort of exists as a career, because you don't really know what designers do. It's sort of a strange floaty term when you originally start. Like you just think design, maybe fashion design, graphic design, which is maybe what I bit into a little bit more coming from a girls' grammar school. But then I was just like, I want to be creative, but also go into like more sciencey sort of things. So I did like biology as well. And it was just sort of trying to marry that all together at the end. And I was like, oh, design can just do all of that. I can help people with creativity. So that's how I eventually fell into looking at product design specifically. And yeah, just visiting loads of degree shows is what got me sort of the knowledge of what's out there in terms of the courses.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. So what was that light bulb moment, that made you decide that, you know what, I want to do product design, and this is what I really want to pursue as a career?
This is, it's not forced at all, but it actually genuinely was going to my first Loughborough degree show. So I went in like, I think 2014 or something like that, went up to Loughborough and just seeing sort of like the broad scope of projects, and then seeing how I could, I was also at that time doing like, I think it was graphic products was the name of the course, and I could see how I could do that as well. And so just having that little niggle, like any project which can relate, and then you could see how that's reflected in like, obviously to a much higher degree and fidelity, the Loughborough students' work. That was my light bulb moment, really.
All right, cheers for that. So let's move on to, you've now done your A-levels and you've made that consensus decision to study product design. So before walking through the doors of the design school, what was your initial perception as to what product design was?
See, product design luckily has like quite a nice name, I think, because product design, you design products. But I always kind of went in with a bit of misunderstanding with industrial design too. I thought industrial design was actually the more technical course, so I actually accidentally did product design. You're not
the only one. You're not the only one. To be very honest, if you look at the words in context, I mean, industrial design.
Yeah, it sounds heavy. Industry.
Yeah, it sounds more that it's much more engineering bias compared to what product design is, but it's actually the other way around. So
exactly.
So you're not but then, one, because I remember. But
then when you leave, everyone's an industrial designer anyway. So I mean, that's exactly. That's the industry term.
Yeah, because I remember I was watching a very old video. I think it was made in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and that's when I first heard the term industrial design. And while watching that video clip, it seemed more industrial-esque. But there was a lot of, okay, you had like the design bit, but you had a lot of technical elements in there. So I was like, okay, doesn't it make sense for maybe the more arty-farty buyer side of it being product design, and then
Yeah,
the more technical element
industrial.
of applied art that should be industrial design, but some people got to get inside the head.
Semantics, isn't it?
Let's call this industrial design. Let's call this one product design. So that was like your mindset going in. So when you started in the first year, what were your experiences like? I mean, when you started to like do some of the arty-farty bits, then you had to do some of the engineering bits. Did that kind of like reinterpret what your perception of product design was?
I mean, when I did go in, so because I knew product design, despite the confusion with the industrial design, I knew that it was going to be designing products. So I knew that there was going to be some sort of technical element coming in. So that was relatively okay. It was actually trying to step away from the artistic side a little bit, or just changing it slightly. So, I mean, drawing with fine art is obviously lots of little lines, very careful shading with pencils. And we're immediately told, here's a biro, you're only drawing with biros now, strong lines. So that was a big, big change for me, and especially because I was going into the more technical course, but with an artistic perspective. But then, having the mechanics and electronics modules coming in, I think we did, was it the Spaghetti Bridge project? It was like a cool applied way of doing the mechanics of things, but it's something I hadn't really touched before either, because I did maths A level, but I didn't do physics as such. So I think it started to make me realize that maybe at the end of this course, I could actually make a working product as opposed to just like the casework. I know that's where most people end up anyway, but it is really nice to have that understanding. And I didn't think I was going to quite have that depth, because I also had a little bit of a debate about whether I was going to go to the engineering course either. So I was pleasantly surprised that we were getting really stuck into the guts of it. It's given me a good appreciation. It took a while to get to that appreciation level. But I mean, I'm at this point where I can actually like properly code and like make working products. So that's pretty neat for me.
All right, cool. All right. So you finished the first year. I mean, what course did you go, you know what, this is the right course for me and I'm going to stick to it? Because normally at that point whereby like, I don't think this is what I really signed for. Maybe I should branch out. But what made you stick it out and decide to progress to the second year?
I think it's quite a lot of the delving into 3D modeling, so CAD. So I've never actually done any CAD sub packages before joining Loughborough. Just seeing the potential of, as soon as you have a model in that aspect, you can literally run with it. You can do anything you want with it. I was like looking around at the rest of my friends and their courses, and they're all doing like theoretical stuff, whereas all the stuff we were doing, the workshops where we make the wood planer, the little MP3 player, as well as the PCB mount, that was like all tangible stuff. And I didn't see any other tangible stuff coming out of any other courses. So I knew this was like, even though it was like a constant pressure, I guess, because we have like full coursework. Well, we had some exam elements too, but compared to other courses, it's mostly just coursework all throughout, as opposed to an exam at the end. I just figured that was my best way of working. It's where I'm most comfortable, and it never really, I mean, obviously it was hard work, but none of this work was stuff that I thought was out of my reach. It was all very logical. Like that was also sometimes a struggle, in that most of the stuff you're learning is kind of like, duh, sort of thing. So you can't really turn around and be like, oh, I learned this very specific concept. It was more like, I understand how to design for users now, which is all common sense, but you don't think about it unless you're put onto that sort of mind line. So just sitting back and appreciating that really is what dragged me into second year.
Okay, all right, cool. So at least it's nice that you didn't decide to switch, decide to stick it out. So at least that's
definitely.
Good mental toughness. All right, so you've now progressed from first year and you're now going to the second year. So how did you find the second year in comparison to the first year?
So this is where, I mean, from a more personal aspect, this is where maybe mental health became a bit more of a consideration. I actually, as a result of my second year, took a leave of absence in between my second and placement. But generally, second year is the busiest year. It is the most jam-packed year, I would say. It's where you learn the most. And you're always having to constantly sell yourself as well, from like basically January until the end of that year, in order to get a placement. So it was exciting. I mean, I might be a bit strange, but I really enjoy looking for jobs. I think it's much easier to sell stuff you've done. And obviously that's what you're doing with a portfolio, with a CV, with interviews. So I really enjoyed that, as well as the general communications module. We did some video hand-ins as well. And I really like that sort of aspect. It's just tying in so many different parts of like the creative field, I guess. You got little bits of marketing, as well as like actually injection molding something, which is what ultimately got me my placement. So, I mean, it was just I would say a busy year. Obviously, I wasn't doing so well on a mental health side of it, but that was just from personal circumstance. The year itself, I thought, was quite exciting. It was definitely a big step up from first year, but not in an alarming way, just obviously it's our second year of university, so pick up the pace.
So in terms of like the second year, what are the things that you studied that kind of like got you to, oh no, it kind of like gave you that focus in terms of what you really wanted to do on your placement?
How do you mean, sorry?
What I meant was, because normally the second year that gets us to start thinking about, okay, what is it that I really want to learn a bit more?
Oh, right, yeah.
Placement, yeah.
I think it was
to set the scene in terms of what you really want to major in, or what you really want to specialize in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I also missed out a little bit prior to like the whole lead up into going to Loughborough. I've always wanted to do medical, and I guess I took everything with a medical slant list in second year, so I knew what to look out for. I knew that UCD principles and some design research methods would be important for like report writing for quite a strictly legislated industry, I guess. So I always knew I was going to try and go for a medical placement, and then just understanding what I need to do to get into that field. That was mostly from the DMT module, because I knew injection molding is basically, I mean, plastic is fantastic for that sort of field. I took great attention to that, as well as trying to go a bit more into the sort of research methods side of things, because I knew that like the human-centered is obviously very important when you're designing for humans. So yeah.
Yeah, because I always had this impression, maybe I'm reading students wrong, that one of the things that they really didn't enjoy, and I think I probably got that more from the BA people, is the research bit. Do you think research is integral when it comes to design? Do you think it's important?
I think it's incredibly important, because I mean that you don't have any leg to stand on if you don't have like the basis, if you don't have the groundwork, really. There's nothing to stand on. So you need to understand a problem first. You need to understand if it's even a problem not worth addressing, but rather if it's a problem that can be addressed and how you can go about, like, so you always need that starting point. So I think any project should have research as like a foundational thing, and it should never stop at that like initial stage either. Many times a project that I've been on has like changed drastically because we find a new technology through research later down the line, or something like that. So there's no point just like designing for yourself or designing with assumptions. It needs to be grounded in reality, because that's where it's going to end up existing.
Yeah, but that's always been like the mindset of students. So I do remember when facilitating, let's say, the injection molding project, when you're trying to get students to be objective, it becomes quite a challenge because they want it a particular way. That's for the fact that, you've got all these constraints, and you know the fact that this will not work. It's only when, they get those marks, and then it clicks that, okay, you know what, maybe I should have listened, and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it tends to be quite difficult, getting students to learn to be a bit more objective minded when it comes to doing design work, as opposed to, being subjective and it has to be what I really want, as opposed to looking at other alternatives that might be a better, a better solution towards the problem you're trying to solve. So that's quite interesting. All right.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, no, you literally, I mean, like design ultimately, I think what's so different about industry to versus what students get up to in schools is that constraints. I mean, there are constraints with briefs that are given during university.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you are always going to be designing to constraints unless you're going to like really, really freelance or really like pure industrial design consultancy work. Often there is just a list of requirements that you have to fulfill. And so you have to look at as many branches going into it as possible. It can't just be like your solid idea the whole time. And like, as much as some projects do come out of the design school into reality, most are just like sort of like thinking pieces or learning pieces. So yeah, just important understanding the importance and researching the importance of like meeting restraints and constraints is important. So yeah.
Cool. All right, thank you for that. So let's talk about your year out in industry. So you've left university, you've got like this perception of this is how things are done on the course. So was there kind of like a shock in terms of how things are in reality in terms of design practice? And how were you able to make those adjustments to cope with the challenges that the placement company placed on you?
Well, I mean, there's also a bit of a disclaimer that I did my placement during COVID years. But luckily I was in a medical placement, so I could actually go into the office still, but most of my work was still remote. Even though I was in office, the senior engineers I was talking to via Teams. What really shocked me is obviously it's just such a different environment. Like I was working in like sort of office cubicles. In comparison, obviously the design school is very open space, all the like tables, and it's very communal working. Is less so with all the restrictions in terms of like the 2 meters apart, everything like that. But even without that, it's still like working in an office is so much different to working in the school. So that was quite a big shock. But the way that I got around it was effectively turning the cubicle into my own little like studio, but like making it so much my space, like doing all the very typical designer stuff of like plastering post-it notes everywhere. And it was mainly also due to my really, really helpful mentor. So I had a mentor throughout the year. He was a senior engineer on the project I was on. And we talked like for hours every day via Teams, and he was like passing on his knowledge, and we were just basically working quite intensely towards bronze projects. So really focusing in on the work is what helped me get through it, because otherwise I would have just been overwhelmed with the fact that everyone's doing things around me. And obviously it's very important work, but if I'm not assigned work, then I'm just like there is a self-driven element to it, but you also need to like know how to tap into that. So I mean, I was talking to my supervisor quite a lot, the R&D director, as well as my personal mentor, to make sure that the work I was doing was relevant. So it was kind of a little bit more reassurance need to be had, but that was because I was just too new to the environment, and that did eventually fade. So just knowing that might be an adjustment period that you need to take, and you should take that as an adjustment. It is different from working close to your friends in the 24/7 CAD lab every day versus when you're in a little cubicle. So I mean, yeah, is focusing in on little steps at a time, but making sure that you always just keep yourself busy was mainly how I tackled it.
Okay, right, cheers for that. Right, so let's talk about a particular project that you worked on with people from your placement company. What was the nature of the thinking behind how or the philosophy in terms of how they're able to execute work from defining what a brief is to the final outcome? And how does that correlate to what you thought design thinking was prior to joining the company?
Yeah, I mean, well, a design thinking always in my head equals double diamond. Like that was like hammered in since year one. Yeah, no, literally. I mean, like I think there was a good while where every single intro lecture said double diamond, so it became a little personal joke between me and my design friends. But yeah, I always just I knew that it was always like, oh yeah, you go discover, divine, that sort of things. But when you actually boil down to it in the real world, I guess, also because I was working in a multidisciplinary team.
Yeah.
So I wasn't working with fellow 20-somethings doing design. I was working with like seasoned engineers. Basically, everyone was an engineer. I was the only designer. And so it was a very strange, also because I had to start thinking about actual like financial things too, which obviously we're made to consider in the course, and it's important to consider, but you don't find the reality of it unless you are spending, or not your money, but the company's money.
Yeah.
And especially with the medical field, my goodness, the amount of zeros, I didn't quite anticipate that. So that was a bit of pressure, but it was more like I knew that we always got given a PRS, so a spec list basically of what needed to be achieved by the end of each of our phases. We worked in small engineering groups, so there was about 5 people per team. And yeah, it was basically, I would be in charge of the outside look, I guess, as the designer on the team, and all the fastenings and everything for that. And it was basically just trying to feed back. It was just constant feedback. Basically, you'd do like 3 hours of work, and then you'd feed back to either the project manager or my mentor, just like, what have I been doing, sort of thing. But then you also sit in on quite a lot of the client talks. So often when we think of feedback in the double diamond approach, because you're always approaching it personally, or in like very small, similar, like-minded groups of peers, the feedback element, which is what always diverges and converges the little diamond and everything, that's coming from clients as well, which I'd never had. So working with clients was also another interesting bubble to pop. And yeah, it's just design thinking. It just has to always be on. If it's a switch, then it's just always constantly flicked up, because it just needs to be running in the background when you're making all these decisions and like feeding back to all the people involved, whether that's internally or externally to the clients.
Okay, all right, cheers for that. So in terms of the actual process, were you more interested in the front endy stuff? So that's the much more industrialized industrial design bits, where it's you focusing more on the client's needs, doing that needed investigation, getting that data set to establish what are the critical requirements and how does that match to the requirements of the client before you go into application and doing all the pretty pictures? Or were you much more keen in the engineering of it?
Well, that's yes to all of those, weirdly enough. I managed to get into, so the project I joined onto, actually, it started a few months prior with the previous intern before me. So I didn't actually design the instrument. I just took it through the design for manufacture. So added all the injection molding considerations. Then that was injection molded. So once that was done, I mean, after we injection molded a couple prototypes, I couldn't really put any more input into that because it'd already been done. So yeah, then I became quite a big source of client communication, because that's when the second or third lockdown happened, I think. And again, I was the only one in office. I was the one receiving all the parts coming in, and liaising with both the engineers as well as like when the timeline was shifting and everything like that. So I did quite a lot of the organizational side of that. I made my own like smart spreadsheet and stuff to track the inventory and how it was coming in, because my placement company also was a manufacturing plant as well, facility. So it was R&D and then manufacturing floor. Because then my final months of the placement, I actually was in charge of the engineering of the actual prototypes themselves. So I actually built up each of the instruments. So I made about 6 off, I think, out of the 8. And I basically became the person who understood how it all assembled together, including highlighting all the things we'd maybe had overlooked, like wire and cabling routing. That's something you can't model, at least not until like all the electronics are straightened out. But because everything was working in different streams, everything came together at the end. And then obviously you notice all the problems and stuff that come about. So then my role fell into building and documenting the issues. And I eventually, when I was handing over the role, it was actually when the project manager himself was retiring. So it became quite important that once both myself and he left, that people knew how to build the products. So I actually made the build assembly documentation for that, or at least the first draft of it. So I actually, luckily enough, managed to go through the whole life cycle. So I did like minor tweaks to the design, like aesthetics, including like some light optical beacon elements. But then it became onto a more organizational communication standpoint. Then it was actually building the thing. And then it was making sure it could be built past me leaving. So yeah, I did all of that really, which was just so valuable. I was really lucky.
Right. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
All right. So So did that consolidate your desire to go into the medical device field?
Yeah, I mean, it even maybe potentially geared me towards, I was considering at one point the packaging side as well as the quality assurance side, because I realized how important, obviously, quality assurance, huge for the medical industry. But I think it was just cool seeing that. I think it was the design for assembly components, how poorly designed things can be if you don't consider that sort of thing. So I was like, oh, there's a bridge, there's like a little gap for me here to bridge that now that I have an understanding of it. So that's where I was like, okay, yeah, I probably want to situate myself here, at least for the foreseeable future. If I can try and really get to grips with that and then make the assembly guys' jobs as least painful as possible, then that would probably be for the best. It means that more products, more help. So
okay. All right, thank you for that. All right, so